Are you tucked in? Good. Tonight, we're going on a journey, not a fast one, not a busy one. A slow, steady, rolling journey through the history of trains. Trains are one of my favorite things to talk about. Because when you look into them properly, when you follow the story from the very beginning, you realize that trains didn't just change how people travel. They changed the whole shape of the world. They changed which towns grew and which ones stayed small. They changed what people ate and where they could live and who they could. All because someone, a long time ago, figured out how to use steam. So, make yourself comfortable. Let's go back to the beginning. The story of the steam engine begins long before trains. It begins in mines, coal mines mostly in the north of England. In the early 1700s, the big problem with deep mines was water. As miners dug deeper into the earth, water would seep in and fill the tunnels. You couldn't pump it out fast enough by hand. The mines kept flooding. A man named Thomas Newcomen built a machine that used steam to power a pump. It was enormous and slow, and it drank a frightening amount of coal just to keep running. But it worked. And it planted an idea. Over the following decades, engineers improved the steam engine. One of the most important was James Watt, a Scottish inventor who made it far more efficient. Suddenly, steam power wasn't just for pumping water. It could drive all kinds of machinery. And then, someone had a remarkable thought. What if you put a steam engine on wheels? A Cornish engineer named Richard Trevithick was one of the first to try. In 1804, he built a steam locomotive in Wales, a machine on iron rails that pulled a load of iron and 70 men for nearly 15 kilometers. It worked. Just about. The rails kept cracking under the weight, and the machine had to be hauled back to the start, but it had moved. Under it, the age of the train had arrived. It just didn't know it yet. The name you really need to know is George Stephenson. Stephenson grew up near Newcastle in the north of England. His father worked at a coal mine, tending the steam engine that pumped out the water. George couldn't read or write until he was almost 18. He taught himself, at night school, while working during the day. He became fascinated by steam engines, by how they worked, by how they could be improved. And he started building locomotives. By 1825, he had completed the Stockton and Darlington Railway, the first public railway in the world to carry passengers using a steam locomotive. It was a historic day. Thousands of people came to watch. The train carried over 400 passengers, at speeds of up to 24 kilometers per hour. The watching crowd. But the most famous moment came in 1829. There was a competition, the Rainhill Trials, to find the best locomotive for a new railway being built between Liverpool and Manchester. Several engineers entered their designs. George Stephenson and his son Robert entered a locomotive called the Rocket. The Rocket won. Comprehensively, it reached speeds of nearly 48 kilometers per hour, faster than a galloping horse. It was reliable. It was efficient. It demonstrated, beyond any doubt, that steam railways were the future. The world would never be the same again. Building a railway in the 1800s was extraordinary work. There were no machines to dig, no trucks to carry the earth. Everything was done by hand. The men who did this work were called navvies, because many of them had previously dug canals, which were called navvies. They worked with picks, shovels, and wheelbarrows. They shifted unimaginable quantities of earth and rock. For every mile of railway laid, workers might move tens of thousands of tons of material. The tunnels were the most dangerous work. Blasting through rock with gunpowder, hacking through chalk and clay by hand, working in darkness, in cramped spaces, with the constant risk of collapse. The Woodhead Tunnel, built through the Pennines in the 1840s, was nearly 5 kilometers long. It took 6 years to complete. 32 men were killed during its construction, and hundreds more were injured. But when it was done, the trains ran through the mountains. Things that had been impossible became ordinary. The viaducts were another marvel. Where valleys were too wide and deep to simply fill in, engineers designed elegant stone bridges that carried the railway high above the valley floor. The Ribblehead Viaduct in Yorkshire, for example, has 24 arches and stands 32 meters above the valley. It was built in the 1870s, and trains still cross it today, 150 years later. These were structures built by men with shovels and cold chisels and an enormous amount of courage. Some trains became famous not just for what they were, but for what they meant. The Flying Scotsman is perhaps the most famous steam locomotive ever built. Made in 1923, she pulled the express service between London and Edinburgh, over 600 kilometers in each direction. In 1934, the Flying Scotsman became the first steam locomotive officially recorded traveling at 100 miles per hour. That's about 160 kilometers per hour on a steam train, on rails laid over 100 years ago. She was painted a rich apple green. She had a graceful shape, long boiler, sweeping lines. People would stand on bridges to watch her pass. The Flying Scotsman is still alive today. She was restored and is occasionally run on special trips. If you ever get the chance to see a real steam locomotive up close, you'll understand immediately why people love them so much. The size, the heat, the noise, the smell of hot oil and steam. They feel alive in a way that modern machines don't quite manage. The Orient Express is a name that sounds like an adventure, and it was. The original Orient Express ran from Paris to Istanbul, a journey of nearly 3,000 kilometers through France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. It took about 60 hours, 2.5 days on a train. When it launched in 1883, it was the height of luxury. Private sleeping compartments with real beds, a dining car with white tablecloths and silver cutlery and waiters in uniforms. Passengers were wealthy travelers, diplomats, spies, or so the rumors always went. The writer, Agatha Christie, was inspired by the Orient Express to write one of her most famous mystery novels. She'd actually been delayed on the train for several days during a heavy snowstorm. Stuck in a snowbound train somewhere in the Balkans, the imagination tends to wander. The original Orient Express ran until 1977. A restored luxury version still operates on special routes today. Now, let's travel to Japan. Japan has mountains and earthquakes and not a lot of flat land. Building railways there is complicated. But in 1964, just in time for the Tokyo Olympics, Japan opened the Shinkansen, the bullet train. The Shinkansen ran at 210 kilometers per hour when it opened. For reference, that's faster than the Flying Scotsman managed at its absolute maximum. And the Shinkansen does it as a regular service. Every day. Carrying millions of passengers. Modern Shinkansen trains travel at up to 320 kilometers per hour. Tokyo to Osaka, 500 kilometers, takes about 2 hours and 15 minutes. The trains are so precisely on time that when there are delays, they are measured in seconds. The average delay on the Shinkansen network is less than 1 minute per journey. In decades of operation, there has never been a single passenger fatality due to a derailment or collision. It is, by any measure, one of the greatest engineering achievements in the history of transport. Steam trains are beautiful, but let's talk about how the trains of today actually work. Most modern trains are electric. They draw power from an overhead wire, called a catenary, or from a third rail alongside the track, and use electric motors to drive the wheels. Electric motors are wonderful things. Unlike a petrol engine, which produces power at its peak only at certain speeds, an electric motor produces its maximum force from the very first moment it starts turning. That's why electric trains accelerate so smoothly and powerfully. Full torque from a standing start. The overhead wire carries high voltage electricity. On many systems, 25,000 volts, which is a staggering amount. A transformer on the train converts this to a usable voltage for the motors. The current is carefully controlled by computers on board that manage acceleration, braking, and power distribution. When the train brakes, many systems use regenerative braking. The motors run backwards, acting as generators, slowing the train while simultaneously producing electricity that gets fed back into the overhead wire for other trains to use. A train slowing down on one part of the network can power a train accelerating somewhere else on the same line. Modern railway signaling uses computers too. Trains on busy lines like the London Underground are controlled by systems that know exactly where every train is, what speed it's going, and can manage the entire network to keep trains moving safely with only seconds between them. There is a tunnel under the sea. Between England and France, under the English Channel, runs a tunnel 50 kilometers long. The deepest part is about 75 meters below the seabed. The idea of a tunnel under the channel had been around for almost 200 years before it was actually built. Napoleon briefly considered it. Victorian engineers drew up plans. But the technical challenges, the cost, and the political complications kept getting in the way. Construction finally began in 1988, with teams of workers digging from both ends, from England and from France, simultaneously. They used enormous tunnel-boring machines. Imagine a rotating disc studded with cutting teeth, driven by huge hydraulic rams. It grinds forward through the rock at walking pace, and behind it, sections of concrete are assembled to form the tunnel walls. Construction. The tunneling machines from England and France met in the middle on the 1st of December 1990. The two teams broke through, shook hands through the gap, and raised their country's flags. After all those years of plans and proposals and abandoned attempts, there was a hole through the bottom of the sea, linking two countries. The Channel Tunnel opened for passengers in 1994. The Eurostar train service now carries you from London to Paris in about 2 hours and 15 minutes. You go underground, and when you come up again, everything is in French. There are actually 3 tunnels, by the way. 2 for trains going in opposite directions, and a smaller service tunnel in the middle for maintenance and emergency access. It remains one of the greatest engineering projects ever completed in Europe. Here is something I want you to think about, just for a moment before you fall asleep. All over the world, right now, trains are running. In Japan, a bullet train is slicing through the dark at 300 kilometers per hour, the lit windows flashing past in a blur. In India, an overnight train is rolling slowly through countryside. Passengers asleep in their bunks, the carriages rocking gently side to side. In Switzerland, a mountain railway is climbing up through snow and pine trees, the valley dropping away below. In London, somewhere deep underground, a tube train is squealing around a curve in a tunnel that was dug by hand in the 1860s. And in a railway museum, somewhere, the Flying Scotsman stands under bright lights, her green paintwork gleaming, waiting for the next time she gets to run. Trains connect people. They connect places. They carry students and business travelers and families going on holiday and farmers bringing goods to market. They carry letters and parcels. And sometimes, on special trains, the mail that someone wrote by hand and is desperate to arrive. The railways changed everything when they came. And in many parts of the world, they're changing things again. high-speed lines, cutting journey times in half, freight moving off roads and onto rail, electric trains running on renewable energy with almost no pollution at all. The story of trains isn't finished. It's still being written. You know quite a lot about trains now. You know about the navvies who dug the tunnels with their bare hands. You know about the Flying Scotsman going 100 miles per hour in 1934. You know about the Orient Express and its white tablecloths and silver cutlery. You know about the bullet trains in Japan arriving on time to within a single minute every day. And you know there's a tunnel at the bottom of the sea. That last one is good to think about. All that water above, and under it, a quiet, lit tunnel, and a train rolling through. Close your eyes now. Imagine you're on a night train, a long one, the kind with sleeping compartments and a rhythm to the wheels on the track. Clunk, 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 clunk. Steady as a heartbeat. Outside the window, fields are passing in the moonlight. Towns appear and disappear. Stars are out. The train rocks very gently from side to side. Your eyes are heavy. The wheels are still turning. Clunk, 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 clunk. But they're getting quieter now. You don't need to know where the train is going. You're warm and safe and almost there. Good night. Sleep well.